Get my 6. Hey everybody, welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid, the most awesome homesteading channel on the internet that has absolutely nothing to do with homesteading. And welcome. Do you see that? Listen, the closer we get to Halloween, the thinner that veil gets. And as you can tell, if you've been following the October night stories so far this month, thank you if you have been, we've moved even closer to the edge of the forest. We are exactly where, field meets forest. We're at elevation. It's almost dark. Got a good story for you tonight. So far, we've been reading, our stories have all come from the new True Hauntings Volume 4, just released within the last week. We're going to be taking stories this month out of all the True Haunting volumes. There's 4 of them so far, and we will be reading selected stories from October Nights and October Nights Part 2. All these books, by the way, are available on Amazon and print or Kindle, and you can get autographed print copies from our Etsy store. The link is in the description box below. Tonight, we are taking our story from October Nights 2, 31 more tales for the Halloween season. This is a beautiful little story called Deadbeat. Listen, I'm going to try not to go off the rails on this, okay? Our current American society is trying to cancel masculinity, I guess, would be how to put it. They're trying to tell us that masculinity is toxic. It's an unfair advantage men have over women, blah, 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 blah. You know who benefits from this ludicrous concept? 2 groups. The group that created this idea of nonsense and who is trying to push it. And number 2, beta males, deadbeats. Males, I call them males, I don't call them men, because it takes more than the proper plumbing to be a man. Men produce, they provide for, they protect, they keep safe, they achieve. They have ambition, they pursue it. They don't mooch, okay? So, anyway, wait, I said I was going to try not to go off the rails, right? Okay, so I'll stop there. Listen, hey, if you're a real man, kudos to you. And you know who appreciates you? Your family you're providing for, the woman that loves you and who you're making feel like a woman. Deadbeat beta males? Sorry, I don't care what society says is in. You might be a fad right now. Yeah, you're a deadbeat. You're a beta male. Now, as my beautiful bride dearly, aka Giggly Girl, would say, with no further ado, let's get to the story. And I'll point out, before y'all try to cancel me, beta male bears no reference upon gender identification or sexual preference. Okay? What it means is you don't work. You're lazy. You have no ambition. You have no drive. And you either mooch off the government, you mooch off of family members with money, or you've married a woman who is a producer, but who has no self-esteem and clearly has terrible taste in men. Okay? Just clear that up. October 3, since it's October 3, Deadbeat. Originally titled, The Unfortunate Demise of Uncle Gimpy. There are 2 places where common, ordinary people, such as myself and most of my friends, can solve all the world's problems. One such place is by the side of a campfire, and me and a few of my best good buddies spend quite a bit of time regularly solving the world's problems around campfires at our family's private campground here on our Central Virginia homestead. And then there are college football tailgate parties. It was about a year ago, it'd be 2 years ago now, as of this writing, 2 years as of this reading, during one such tailgate party where me and a few of my best good buddies were solving all of the world's problems, when I came across the tale of the very fortunate demise of Uncle Gimpy, which I shall relate at this time. I'd been tailgating with some of my regular tailgating buddies at yet another home UVA football game in Charlottesville. Go Hoos. Our conversation had made its way to the issue of the vast, seemingly growing number of what I refer to as beta males in American society. Now, before you jump to conclusions and start calling me all kinds of bad things that I'm not, let me point out exactly what I mean by a beta male, which I've kind of already done. It has nothing to do with sexual preference or gender identification or any of the other hot button issues the lamestream media likes to use to pit people off against each other and get them hating each other and fighting all the time. The term could be defined most simply with one word: deadbeat. Beta males are basically the opposite of alpha males. Whereas alpha males are driven, ambitious, self-motivated go-getters who are high producers at their businesses, jobs, or in their professions, and typically provide very well for their families, beta males are none of these things. Rather, they are lazy and unmotivated. They lack any sort of self-motivating abilities and are therefore incorrigible. They typically never achieve anything of note, and they depend upon other people taking care of them, and providing for them, whether it be the taxpayer by way of entitlements or perhaps a family member with means, usually a parent or an in-law, or in the most pathetic case, as far as this writer sees it, by mooching off of a hard-working woman who is an alpha and who goes out and works and brings home the bacon and fries it up in a pan and all that jazz, but who obviously has deeply rooted insecurities and willingly plays the role of a sucker, because otherwise she would not tolerate caring for and providing for such a deadbeat. I think you hit the nail on the head, one of my best good tailgating buddies in attendance said after I'd mentioned my hunch about this last part, i.e. the deeply rooted insecurities of the alpha females who tolerate deadbeats. He agreed with me because, and as he hated to admit it, he'd had an uncle who was one such beta male deadbeat. We all tried to console him, admitting that many of us either have a beta male in our family or, worse, some of us have alpha male female sisters who've ended up with such deadbeats. No comment. My tailgating buddy's uncle was named Gimpy. Well, not really, but that's what they called him. You see, his left leg was nearly a foot shorter than his right leg. I'm hearing footsteps, so you make sure to keep getting my 6. He wore one of those special shoes with the big rubber sole on the bottom so he could walk without wobbling around too much. Gimpy's physical condition was just one of numerous excuses he would use to remain mostly unemployed. At times, when forced to get a real job by way of his extremely frustrated alpha female wife, Rachel, he would make sure to become underemployed, intentionally not earning enough money to make it worth the time and gas money to even show up for work. But even these periods didn't last long. However, as Gimpy was the kind of deadbeat that even when he would go out and get a job, he would never keep it for more than 3 or 4 days, usually, but every now and then 3 or 4 weeks. In a word, Gimpy never held a job for an entire month at any point in his life. I think Aunt Rachel was insecure about her size, my buddy told us as he began giving more details about his mother's slightly younger brother, Gimpy, and the life that he'd led. Rachel was an absolutely beautiful woman, my buddy said, but she stood just a bit over 6 feet tall and was pushing close to 200 pounds. She was just big, and I think she was insecure about that, so she married down in choosing Uncle Gimpy. My best good buddy said that his Aunt Rachel, long dead now, had been a teacher, a profession not known for a great income. The silver lining on the cloud of her economic condition was that her parents had been affluent. They'd always helped support their daughter, though she'd never needed the help until she took on Uncle Gimpy as dead weight. And when they died, they'd left her a considerable amount of money as well as the farm that had been in the family for several generations. Her father had raised cattle, but Rachel had wanted nothing to do with farming. She allowed other farmers to lease her land to run their cattle and cut the hay, but that was all for a marginal amount of money, just enough to pay the taxes on the property. So to avoid dipping into her inheritance funds to the best of her ability, she taught school. She loved teaching school, and she was considered among one of the best teachers at her school by her students and co-workers alike. She just had really terrible taste in men, at least when she'd made the decision to shack up with Uncle Gimpy. And again, this seemed to all be rooted back to insecurities in regard to her size. Tree knock, you hear it? Uncle Gimpy spent most of his days inside the old farmhouse his wife had inherited. He had his particular television shows he liked to watch, which I would imagine were probably much like Maury Povich and Judge Judy at the time. This is going back years, you know. When his shows were over, if it wasn't too hot outside or too cold, because Uncle Gimpy seemed to be extremely weather sensitive, he always had to, set the thermostat at 68 in the winter, 72 in the summer, and don't go outside at any time of year if the temperature's not in that range. Had to be comfortable. He would often toss a line in the old cattle pond on the far end of the property and sit there and drink beer, waiting for the fish to bite. The pond had been stocked many years earlier and pretty much forgotten about, and there were some pretty big catfish in it, as well as bass and various forms of sunfish. My best good tailgating buddy told me that when he'd been a kid, the man is in his late 60s now, he would go fishing in that old farm pond with his Uncle Gimpy. He said Uncle Gimpy loved jokes, and he was always asking him, my friend, if he'd heard any good ones lately. My friend would tell Uncle Gimpy a joke, and if it was good and Gimpy laughed, the laugh came out lazy, if you can even imagine what that might have sounded like. Huh, 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 is how the man described it, holding his jaw slack but not actually moving his mouth to enunciate, for you see, even that would have required more energy than Uncle Gimpy was willing to spend. Every now and then, my best good tailgating buddy continued, Aunt Rachel would just get fed up with it. I don't guess she really needed the extra income he might have provided had he not been a beta male, but it was just the principle of it all. Sometimes people she worked with would ask if Gimpy had gotten a job yet, or if Gimpy was even looking for a job, and her answer was always the same: no. Sounded a bit like a distant footsteps. Okay, we had a howl, and then we just had footsteps. Keep watching. At times like this, when Aunt Rachel would be questioned by her friends or family about Gimpy's lack of doing anything, she would put her foot down and demand Gimpy get a job. And again, every time he would, he'd quit a few days or a few weeks at the most later, except for once. Uncle Gimpy, it turns out, was able to get a job as a motel desk clerk in town. Rachel and everyone else was really pulling for him, figuring that since he'd gotten a job where he got to sit all day and where he only dealt with customers on occasion, he might actually be able to keep the job. To everyone's surprise, he did. Keep watching. After Gimpy had been on the job for a month, and after he had actually received 2 bi-weekly paychecks, he continued to get up every morning, shower, get dressed, and go to work. However, 2 weeks after this, on payday, he did not receive his paycheck. At least that's the story he relayed to his wife. There was a screw-up with payroll, Gimpy told Rachel when she asked how much he'd received. They told me they'll have it fixed by the next pay period, and I'll just get it on that check. Rachel believed what she'd been told, but when the next pay period came, once again, Gimpy didn't get a paycheck. Sure, he had an excuse, something about the payroll department being incompetent, and he assured her that he'd get one heck of a big paycheck 2 weeks later. This time, she did not believe him. The following Monday, Rachel left for work, but she did not go to work. She decided to take one of her many personal days she had saved up at work and find out just what her ne'er-do-weller husband was up to. She left her house at the normal time, but instead of driving to school, she drove to the motel where Gimpy was working. Instead of parking in the motel's parking lot, she parked in the parking lot of a restaurant across the road from the motel. Half an hour after parking in the lot across the road, she saw Gimpy roll up in the hotel in his car. Actually, it was her car, an old beater left to her by her parents before they died. There's something back there. Keep looking for it. Gimpy's old beater wasn't dependable enough to drive to work or anywhere else for that matter because he never had the money to get it repaired when it broke down. And since it was 20 years old and never cared for, not even washed, it broke down often. After parking his car on the far side of the motel parking lot, reserved for employees, no doubt, Rachel watched as a cleaning lady appearing to be getting off shift came out of the motel and went to Gimpy's car. Well, Rachel's car that Gimpy drove, but we've covered that already. and got into the car with him. The car then drove off, and of course, Rachel followed. Gimpy and the cleaning lady drove about a mile up the road to another motel. This was not a nice motel. This was a no-tell motel. The kind that people who are having affairs go to in order to, you know what. Now, here, until a few years later, is where the story gets a little mixed up as far as the facts go. My best good tailgating buddy said after all this, he and his mother went out to Rachel and Gimpy's place one weekend so my best good tailgating buddy could fish in the old farm pond. And lo and behold, old Gimpy was gone. My best good tailgating buddy said that Aunt Rachel told him and his mother about what she'd caught Gimpy doing and that she'd thrown him out. Where did he go? My best good tailgating buddy's mom asked Rachel. I don't know and I don't care, Rachel said. But all of his stuff's still here, my best good tailgating buddy said. I told him to leave immediately and that he was not to take anything with him because he'd never paid for any of it anyway, and he just left, Rachel had said. Can I still go fishing? My best good tailgating buddy said. Of course you can, Aunt Rachel said, and he did. Over the years, my best good tailgating buddy would spend a lot of time fishing in that old cow pond, especially during the summer, and especially at night, and especially once he'd reached the age of sipping on cold ones himself, like his Uncle Gimpy always had when he'd fished the pond. He'd found that magic combination of cold beer on the banks of a catfish hole on a warm Virginia night. Go Cavs. And it's iced tea, by the way. I swear to God, he told us at the tailgate party, there were nights I either got shitty drunk or I was hearing things because I could have sworn I could hear old Uncle Gimpy with that lazy laugh of his. A couple of times he added, I got scared and left. My buddy's Aunt Rachel would eventually pass away. Unfortunately, it was premature as she had developed breast cancer and lost her battle. She died just before her 60th birthday, only having spent a few short years without the albatross of Uncle Gimpy hanging around her neck. She never remarried after she kicked Uncle Gimpy out, my buddy told us. Heck, she didn't even go through the hassle of officially filing for divorce. She was just glad to be rid of that deadbeat, and even though Uncle Gimpy had been blood kin, we were happy for her because she'd always been a really nice lady. And no, we never heard from Uncle Gimpy again, and we all figured we were all the better off for it. As nice and good-natured as he was, I mean, he was really nice and friendly. But he was nothing more than a grown-ass dependent no one wanted to support. Nobody was nice. Since Rachel had had no children, nor had she had any siblings, she'd left the farm to a not-for-profit organization that benefited children in need. They'd sold the property to a family who my good tailgating buddy actually knew, and they were kind enough to allow him and his family to continue to fish in the old farm pond anytime they wanted. I remember it like it was yesterday, my best good tailgating buddy told us. Just as we were about to make the roughly 1 mile trek from our tailgate party in the parking lot across from the UVA track and baseball, softball, and soccer fields in Charlottesville, up Alderman Road to Scott Stadium to get to the game in time for kickoff. There was this one summer when we had what must have been the worst drought in Virginia history. I mean, that summer was so dry, there wasn't even a single morning when there was dew on the grass. Then that fall, on Halloween night of all nights, the rain started falling. My best good tailgating buddy said, and it rained like it was never going to stop. It rained buckets of cats and dogs all night and the next day too. We got a call from the family who'd bought the farm once the storm was over, my buddy said. They called to tell us that it had rained so much and flooded so much that the earthen dam at the lower end of the old farm pond had given way and burst, and almost all of the water had washed out of the pond. They said there were just a couple of pools of water left, about a foot deep each, and that all the fish in the pond were congregating in these pools, and they asked if we wanted to come over and get any fish. They told us there were some real monster cats in there. I didn't really want any of the fish, my best good tailgating buddy said, but I wanted to see them at least. I wanted to see how big some of those fish were, and I didn't mind helping those people try to save some of the fish if we could figure out a way to do it. So I got my waders, and me and the missus, we didn't have our girl yet, went over there, and what a sight we saw. Boy, I tell you, there must have been 24 catfish pulled together in what looked like mud holes that were every bit of 50 pounds each, and I kid you not. Wow. I got down there in the mud with that other family and a couple of other people they'd called to come over, and I was doing my best to pick up any flopping fish I saw floundering around in the mud. No pun intended, because they weren't flounders. That's a saltwater fish, of course. Well, then how could it be a pun? How did my editor not... Oh, yeah, my editor got too drunk to edit the book, and I had to do it myself. Bastard. And after just a few minutes into it all, I heard someone say, "What in tarnation is this?" I looked over, and there's this 12-year-old kid holding up a human arm bone. It was a forearm, and it still had a hand on it. Well, the skeletal remains of a hand. "Holy shit," someone else yelled, and we all got up out of that pond as quick as we could. Someone called 911, and the EMS people came out. I don't know why they sent EMS. Whoever remains we'd found was obviously past the point of resuscitation. Anyway, my best good tailgating buddy continued. They got some police down in that pond, and they managed to pull out most of the remains, and when they'd had them all laid out there on the bank, I took one good look at that pile of bones and told them I could save them a hassle and an autopsy, or whatever in the hell it is they do with bones to figure out who they'd belong to, because I knew exactly who those bones had once belonged to. I could tell by the way that one leg was about a foot shorter than the other. It was Uncle Gimpy. "Holy shit," me and all my other best good tailgating buddies said at this junction. "Holy shit is right," my best good tailgating buddy said. Juncture. That was a reading error. Okay? "Holy shit is right," my best good tailgating buddy said. "I reckon we finally knew exactly what had happened to Uncle Gimpy. Aunt Rachel had had enough, and it wasn't bad enough that the man was mooching off of her, but to be out there gallivanting around on her too? Well, I guess Aunt Rachel had decided old Gimpy wasn't good for anything anyway, and she put him, maybe not so much out of his misery, but she definitely put him out of her misery. The police found what looked like a bullet hole right through the middle of the front of his skull, and the exit hole on the backside had taken off most of the back of his skull. I guess the moral of this story might be, if there is a moral to this story, is that if these beta males who are out there living off of a woman, be it the mother who owns the basement they live in, or the wife or live-in girlfriend who's supporting them, think they're safe and they're getting a free ride, and they've got it all on cruise control, well, they might want to think again. They might want to think about getting up off their dignity, getting a job and keeping it, and keeping old one-eyed Willie in their pants while they're at work. Otherwise, I'd say more than just a few of them might end up like poor old Uncle Gimpy. The end. What a creepy story. Sometimes I go back and read stuff I wrote years ago, and I'm like, I wrote that? But yeah, I guess so. I wrote all 31 of these. I wrote all 31 in part 2, and I wrote some of the ones in the True Haunting series, but most of these were submitted by viewers like you, if you're a viewer who submitted one, submitted by viewers on the channel, people who read my books from Amazon and whatnot. These books are all available on Amazon, print and Kindle, links in the description box below. Hope you enjoyed this, and it's still early in October. We got like 28 days left, so... The plan is to be here every evening throughout the month of October telling these creepy stories. I mean, we got ghosts and ghouls and deadbeats and all kinds of stuff to tell about. So, hope you enjoyed this one from here at Homesteading Off the Grid, the like baddest ass homesteading channel in the world, not just on the internet. I mean, even though you're watching it on the internet, it's like if you could watch it somewhere other than even the internet, it would be the greatest homesteading channel anywhere that has absolutely nothing to do with homesteading. See you for more next time.